and welcome to this continuing first look exploring session looking at Gismond of Salerne, the early years. So this is us going back to the original manuscript texts of Gismond of Salerne, sometimes known as Gismond of Salerne in Love, written by the Gentleman of the Inner Temple. There are 5 hands to this text. Each of them got an act, and they're very separate. This is not to be confused with all the sessions we've done on what we call Tancred and Gismunda, which is the rewritten, published version from 1591. They are very similar in many ways, but they are also quite different, which is why we're doing this twice. We've just done this a bit weird in that we're doing the first version second, just to confuse you. So, but we are going to go from Act 4, Scene 2 onwards. We've just had the Furies come up through the floorboards and throw snakes at people. So, everybody's a bit cursed now. I'm going to start, hopefully, ramping up. I say hopefully, that just makes me sound like a sociopath. Going to work their way towards horrible murder and death. So that's something to look forward to, boys and girls. Reading today, reading Tancred himself is...
I am Greg, and I'm really looking forward to getting my teeth into this role again. Oh, yes.
Yeah, some important textual differences will occur between Tancred in this version and the one you're used to. Reading Gismond and Guishard, her would-be lover, is...
Hello, Lynsey Beauchamp, actor in Kirkcaldy, in receipt of the booster jab this afternoon, so if I pass out, I apologise.
Just do it in character. It'll be very fitting for the play.
I think I get to at some point, don't I? I get to actually pass out. So.
Yeah, pass out. All sorts of things. I won't spoil it for those who haven't read it. Reading Renuchio is...
Hello, I'm Desna from Lancaster.
And reading Julio and Chorus is...
Hi, I'm Tom from Brighton.
And I'm your host, Robert Crighton. I will read the few stage directions that there are and try and keep everything moving forward. Reading then from Act 4, Scene 2, Tancred cometh out of Gismond's chamber. Also present are Renuchio and Julio, who may or may not say anything.
Oh, great almighty Jove, whom I have heard to be the god that guides the world as best it liketh thee, that dost with thunder throw out of the flaming skies the blaze of thy revenge on whom thy wrath doth rise. Grant me, as of thy grace, and as for my relief, that which thou pourest out as plagues onto the grief of such whose sins have whet the sharp and deadly ire. Send down, O Lord, from heaven thy what-consuming fire to reave this rueful soul, whom torments to and fro do toss in cruel wise with raging waves of woe. O earth, that mother art to every living wight, receive the woeful wretch whom heaven have in despite. O hell, if other hell there be than that I feel, to ease him with thy flames, whom frowning fortune's wheel have thrown in deep distress of far more pinching pain than hell can heap on those that in his pit remain. O daughter, whom alas most happy had I been if living on the earth the sun had never seen, is this my hope in joy, my comfort, and my stay to glad my griefful years that waste and wear away? For happy life that thou received hast by me, 10,000 cruel deaths shall I receive by thee? For joy that I have had, and for my whole delight that I, accursed wretch, did settle in thy sight, is this my due reward. Alas, to behold the thing that makes me wish that earth the gaping mould had swallowed into hell this caitiff corpse, that I should live to see the cause that daily I do die, and yet by daily death I cannot that attain that death doth daily bring to some, whom pining pain makes glad to go from hence, and joyful to embrace the gentle dame that cuts the cruel twisted lace. Whom shall I first or most accuse in this my woe? The God that guideth all and yet hath guided so? That God shall I blaspheme? Or curse the cruel fate that thus on rocks of Ruth have steered mine estate? Or rather that vile wretch, that traitor shall I blame, by whom I have received my sorrow and my shame? Or her shall I labour, or her shall I abhor, and her shall I avow to his revenging wrath? And I beseech to bow his ear to my request and grant that I desire to burn to cinder dust with flash of heavenly fire, the naughty traitor first to feed my boiling ire, my cursed daughter next, and then the wretched sire, when I, as is my wont, such is the fond delight to feed myself with joy and pleasure of her sight, my daughter, now my death which in her chamber sought, while I had hoped she was, but there I found her not. I deemed for her disport she and her damsels were forth to the garden walked for to refresh them there. And weaning thus did mind a while alone to stay and tarry her return, to let their play. At her bed's feet I sat, and this accursed head with curtain close I wrapped, that would I had been dead and shrouded with my sheet a senseless corpse engraved, my last and longest rest to take, as happily have these wealful wights, whom death's unfriendly dart have slain. When I, in hope of sleep to rest my thoughtful brain, there sat and saw, oh, by a secret framed door at my hideous vault, up through the chamber floor, Gismond brought by the hand the Count Palarine. And there upon the bed, before my first eyes, in most unshamefast wise, this traitor earl and she, alas, why is it true? Unwetting made me see, alas, her shame is treason, and my deadly grief, her shameless body yielded to the traitor thief. The high despite hereof that griped my grifeful breast had well near forced my heart with sorrow all distressed by certain shriek to show some parcel of my smart and to unlaid woe words the burden my heart. I thought even in that pang the curtain to unfold and thunder at them both. Grief did so withhold my mind in trance-like maze, that as a senseless stone I neither wit nor tongue could use to express my moan, but stayed, astounded, and forced, as ancient poets tell, how doth the griffin gnaw great Titus' heart in hell, forced as perforce to yield my heart to biting pain, to gnaw thereon as greedy famine doth constrain the eager empty hawk piecemeal to pluck her prey. But what shall I do? Am I seek to stay the furore of my mind, or how shall I devise to work some due revenge to feed these wretched eyes that are conveyed unto my soul by cursed sight, the pain that pines my life with dolour and despite?
What is your grace's will with me?
Call my daughter. My heart doth boil till I may see.
Renuchio goeth to call Gismond, but cometh not in with her.
Her present here for to unburden all my breast unto herself, the only cause of mine unrest. Which shall I destroy them both? And in my glowing rage to cool and brew with both their bloods these trembling hands to assuage but the thirsting of revenge that boileth in my breast? And shall I send to hell their ghosts that have oppressed this heart with hellish grief? And shall they both be slain? And shall they both by death abide my cruel pain? Alas, to me that one, the daughter, is so dear, she cannot die the death and leave me living here. These arms can sooner rend out of this woeful chest the unhappy living heart, the liver, and the rest that yield unto the same their lively power to move, than they one cursed joint can bend, for to remove her life that makes my life in deadly smarts and pass. The far most cruel kind of death that ever was. But if the fervent force of present fury might surmount all nature's strength, and could wish kindled spite and kindly wield, this had to reave Gismunda's life. Were there the end? Or there mote cease the stormy strife that weltereth up the waves of wrath and sorrow, so to sink my silly soul in gulf of grief and woe? No. No. Her bloodless ghost will still pursue my sight, and from the deepest hells will move her gashful sprite to wait on me, a shadow in the shining day, in doleful wise to wreak her murder as she may. I will do thus, therefore. The traitor shall not live to scorn his pained prince. The heart I will bereave out of his ripped breast, and send it to take her last delight of him for whom she did forsake her father and herself, her duty and her fame. For him she shall have grief by whom she hath the shame. His slaughter and her tears, her sorrow and his blood shall to my rancorous rage supply delightful food. Julio! Julio!
Whatever pleases your noble grace, lo, here pressed to perform.
Julio, this is the case. If heretofore we have not trusted in vain, now we must reprove. Julio, now must we use your truth, your force, your courage, and your pain. We must command, and you may not refuse.
How by your grace's bounty I am bound, beyond the common bond, wherein each white stands bound to his prince, how I have found worship and wealth by favour in your sight. I do reknowledge with most thankful mind, my truth with other means to serve your grace are still so pressed, whatever be assigned, as if you shall command even in this place myself, even but to satisfy your will. Yea, though unkindly horror would gainsay with cruel hand and lively blood to spill, that feeds this faithful heart, I would not stay, but straight before your face would fiercely stain this blade in blood, that at your royal best should largely stream even from the dearest vein that serves the soul in this obedient breast.
Well, to be short, for I am grieved too long by wrath without revenge, I think you know that while was this place builded strong for war, where dreadless peace have planted now a weak court, where we long time have reigned and ruled in rest. But of that palace old against the force of time, one vault remained. That secret way under the Dolian mould conveyeth straight unto the place where lies Gismond, my daughter. There the chamber floor doth hide a huge hole, where doth arise one mouth of this deep cave. There was the door within the court, there is another mouth without the wall that now is overgrown by time. From hence it lieth directly south, a furlong from this court. It may be known but by a stump where stood an oaken tree that since the old court's decay began to grow. There will we that you watch. There shall you see a traitor mount out of the vault below. Bring him to us. It is the Earl Paladine. What is his fault? Neither shall you inquire, nor can I now declare. These cursed eyes have seen the flame. This heart hath felt the fire that cannot else be quenched but by his blood. This must be done. This see you do in haste.
Both this and else what your grace thinketh good. I shall obey so long as life doth last.
And Julio departeth into the palace. And then we're going to pause just to take an in-breath there. Tancred earlier was quite sane. I mean, a bit weird. But, nothing that, a good cup of tea and a sit down might have solved. Here, I mean, it's so extreme. And in this earlier version, I mean, the lines are just longer. There's more stuff here. I mean, so in that sense, I don't think it's a longer speech in terms of feet. It's just its width is there's more girth to it, and there's just so much stuff and so much more alliteration. It's so much more florid. It's actually slightly less Freudian than the later version because it's more that, he sat at the bottom of the bed and the curtains are wrapped around him and so they can't see him. Whereas in the later version, it seems more like he's thrown himself onto the bed and he's sort of luxuriating in her bedclothes in a really quite creepy way. So in a sense, it's a shame, but that it's not quite so creepy. But yeah, it's got all the other stuff there. I mean, Greg, how was it to perform?
Wow. As we were saying, really alliterative. A lot of repeat letters, which actually really helped bring out the anger. Because you're almost stuttering and spitting your way through so much of that speech. I miss the fact that the dad does what he does in the second version, where he sniffs the sheets, because that almost makes it more believable. But it's a horrible scene at the same time. So actually, I also at the same time don't miss that section of the speech. I mean, I know Rob and I were the only ones here on Tuesday, but I find Tancred's journey more believable this time. For some reason, he seems more realistic.
Whereas I think he's more of a vault-face this time, because earlier in this version, he's quite reasonable. I think in the last version, he's more intemperate slightly earlier, and he's already arguing with people. Whereas he doesn't have the pushback in this version.
We don't have
everyone else in the room. We're Greg and I will just talk amongst ourselves for a moment.
I mean, I know what you mean. Actually, I'm thinking about it because, for example, I know that, again. Sorry, guys. That the scene where him and Gismunda had the short, sharp lines between them, which is very. I don't know if it ever happens in this version. There's more long speeches, but there was that bang, bang, bangs scene quite early on in the original, the second version. But yeah, no, lovely. Can't wait to see what happens next.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing is, we've got both versions. We can, to a degree, mix and match a bit. I mean, all of the points are there. Just the words are very different, and there's a lot of different word choices, and there's and some of them just bring in a really different energy to it. Sometimes, which last time I thought it didn't have the energy. This time it's got that energy in spades. Actually, but yeah, how was it for those who've never heard it before or have no idea? What was your impression of it? Either Desna or Tom, who've never been through this kind of experience before. Desna.
So I was quite impressed with the level of anger and the snakiness. I think you said at the beginning that everyone's got snakes attached to them by this point. So maybe that explains the slight character switch. But yeah, it's kind of intriguing and interested to see where it goes next. Although quite a lot has been telegraphed up, I think, about where it's going to go next.
He has given quite detailed instructions as to what he wants to happen next. I mean, it's this he not only has he discovered that there is a cave in the bottom of his daughter's bedroom, which is not Freudian at all, but he seems to have actually gone down with a LiDAR and done a full mapping of the route, and I almost expect a sort of presentation with a 3D map here, because he really does go through it, and you go down here and you turn left and there's a thing. It's very detailed. It's just as detailed in the later version as well. Tom, any thoughts?
No, I mean, I don't know the weather before, but it certainly is brewing up a storm, and you can see the storm clouds starting to gather. So yeah, I'd be interested to see how it goes.
Excellent. Well, on that note, let us see where we go, because Act 4, Scene 3, Julio having just departed into the palace, Act 4, Scene 3, Gismond cometh out of her chamber, having been called by Renuchio, and it's Tancred and Gismunda for this, Gismond for this scene. Tancred doesn't have a massive speech at all here either.
Gismond, if either I could cast aside all care of thee, or if thou wouldst have had some care of me, it should not thus betide that either through thy fault my joy should fade, or by my folly I should bear the pain that thou hast deserved. But neither I can escape the grief whom thou hast more than slain, nor thou canst now recure the wound. For why neither the chaste and undefiled state of wormless life can be restored to thee, nor my comfort, whose loss I rue too late, can till desired death return to me. Gismond, it is no man's or men's report that hath by likely proofs inflamed in me a light believing rage, in fickle sort to vex myself and be displeased with thee. No. There stayed in me so settled trust that thy chaste life and corrupted mind would not have yielded to unlawful lust of straying love, other than was a sign lethal by law of honest wedlock's band, that if these self-same eyes had not beheld thy shame that wrought the woe wherein I stand, in vain 10,000 Catos should have told that thou didst honestly agree with that vile traitor Count Palarine, without regard had to thyself or me, and shamefastly to stain thy state and mine. But I, unhappiest man alive, have seen, and having seen, I feel the passing grief that by those eyes have pierced this heart with thine, who never else had entered in belief. I fight within myself. For justice's law, enforced with fury of enkindled ire, my diversely distraughted mind doth draw to weak the wrong, and so to quench the fire with guilty blood, which floods of guiltless tears still flowing from my face cannot assuage, but still it grows, and still on my life it wears. My grief therefore bids me obey my rage. But nature, that hath locked within thy breast my life, on the other side doth stiffly strive, being well near now by fury's force oppressed, in thee to save thee and myself alive. Thus the traitor neither right can say, nor nature doth entreat. For him therefore my full determined mind doth stand and stay, but what of thee shall be decreed before I yield to nature. I'm sorry, Rob, I'm going to have to go from here. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to disappear for a second.
That's all right. Where did you get to?
It was around about 6 lines or so before the end of that speech.
Right, I'll go from. But what of thee? Shall we go from there?
But what of thee shall be decreed? Yes, I think that would be. I think that would be about right.
Desna, I don't think you're doing anything at the moment. Would you like to be Tancred for a
Shall
little?
I be Tancred?
Yeah.
Okay. But what of thee shall be decreed before I yield to nature or obey to right? I am contented of thyself to know what for thyself alone thou canst recite, to uphold the side that grief doth overthrow. Say why thou shouldst live, whose only crime brings hourly pain to bridge thy father's time.
Father, if either I myself could see why I would live, considering the case of him for whom I live, or you would be as right and use of the renowned race of gentle princes whence you do descend, do teach, then neither now should I have need in his or my defence long time to spend, nor yet my tears or words should want to shed, or say why I should live or he not die, whom as I love on earth, so when it please in time the love Almighty, either by doom of your cruel best or other ways, to take to heaven from hence my fainting breath, this wretched life shall cease for to sustain, woe shall withhold me from the friendly death, that should in during joy conjoin us twain. But sith it so hath settled in your mind that neither he shall live, nor you will be the father or the prince, whom we may find such as my falsed hope be hight to me, as his deserts in service to your grace do justly claim, or as my ruthful tears do humbly crave. If neither in this case, for him may he nor I appease the fierce and cruel rage of grief that strains your heart. Alas, vain is to ask what I can say, why I should live. Sufficeth for my part, Gismond, to say I will not live, and there to stay.
And Gismund departeth into her chamber. Act 4, Scene 4, the scene continues. Julio bringeth in Guishard, prisoner. It's a good thing Gismund exited, because she has to come back on as Guishard in this reading.
If pleases your highness, lo, here I have brought captive, as was commanded by your grace, this gentleman, whom we have happily caught, as was foretold, climbing out of the palace where we were willed to watch. What else shall please your highness to command? Lo, here the heart, the hand, and body, pressed by land and seas, through frost and fire, through peril, pain, and smart.
Julio, we praise your truth. Ah, Palarine, had I deserved that in so traitorous wise thou should present unto these woeful eyes my shame, whereon so deadly grief doth rise, and whelms my grieved heart with deep distress, that neither can I live, content to live, nor cease to live. Such pain doth still oppress us, my soul, that still in wrath and woe I strive, and strain my fainting breath to feed my grief with words and sighs. But such is the smart that neither love himself can give relief, nor wailing can suffice to express my heart. Then, Palarine, what shall I deem of thee, that thus thy woeful prince doest daily slay? Sith plaint and tears suffice not, I will see if death and blood suffice my pain to stay.
Sir, neither do your trickling tears delight my wretched soul, nor yet mine own unhap doth grieve my heart. Such is the endless might of love, that never shall the cruel hap that did envy my joys invade this breast so far with dolour and with dread, that for her that wholly hath my heart possessed, in greatest lust to live should fear to die. Such is again my truth unto your grace, that more your grief assails my soul with pain than can my bloody slaughter in this case. But greater Lord is love, and larger reign he hath upon each god and mortal wight than you upon your subjects have, or I upon myself. What then shall most delight your grieved ghost, that I shall live or die, to ease your pain, I am content to bear. And eke by death I joy that I shall show myself her own, that hers was living here, and hers will be wherever my ghost shall go. Use you my life or death for your relief, to stay the tears that moist with griefful eyes, and I will use my life and death for proof that hers I lived, and die that lined mine.
Thine, Palarine, and shall I so sustain such wrong? Is she not mine and only mine? Me liefer were 10,000 times be slain than thou should justly claim and use for thine her that is dearer than myself to me. Julio, we will that you inform straightway Renuchio how we command that he and you this traitor Palarine convey unto the dungeon deep where Willem was, the tour that length of time hath made decay. There shall he stay till farther of the case you understand by us. For you we will, Renuchio shall resort to us to know what we intend, and how he shall fulfil our pleasure in the rest. For sorrow so doth boil within my breast, and stills the brine out of these flowing eyes, that till they see some sharp revenge on thee, Palarine, by cruel slaughter, vaid it is for me to hope the stay of grief.
And Tancred hastily departeth into the palace.
O mighty Jove, that hast thyself even from thy heavenly throne stooped down, felt and confessed the force of love, bend gentle ear unto the woeful moan of me, poor wretch, and grant that I require. Help to persuade that same great God, that he so far remit his might and slake his fire from my dear lady's kindled heart, that she may hear my death without her hurt. And so I yield myself, my silly soul, and all to him for her, for whom my death shall show I lived, and as I lived, I die her thrall. Grant this, O greatest God. This shall suffice my faithful heart to die in joyful wise.
And Guishard is sent to prison. Enter Chorus.
The fruits of Paris' love, who doth not know, nor eke what was the end of Helen's joy. He may behold the fall and overthrow of Priam's house, and of the town of Troy. His death at last, and her eternal shame, for whom so many a noble knight was slain, so many a duke, so many a prince of fame bereft his life, and left there in the plain. Medea's armed hand, Elysia's sword, wrenched Leander's drenched in the flood. Phyllis so long that waited for her lord, to show the end of wicked love is blood. But he that doth in virtue his lady seem, ne wills but what unto her honour longs. He never stands in cruel point to starve. He feeleth not the pangs, ne raging throngs of blind Cupid. He lives not in despair, as do his servants all, nay, spends his days twixt joy and care, betwixt vain hope and fear, but seeks a way that may his sovereign please in honour. He who so serves reaps the fruit of this sweet service. Aye, no jealous dread, nor no suspect of aught to let the suit which causeth oft the lover's heart to bleed, doth fret his mind, or burneth in his breast. He waileth not by day, nor wakes by night, when every other living thing doth rest, nor finds his life or death in her one sight, as pleases her to smile, or else to frown that holds his heart. Nay, writes this woeful lays to move to pity, or to pluck down her stony mind, which yields as to the seas the rocky cliff that standeth on the shore. And many a time the gudgeon of their love repentance is, in virtue served therefore thy chaste lady, nor do thou not so love, as whilom Venus did the fair Adone, but as Diana loved the Amazon's son. Through her request the gods to him alone restored new life. The twine that was undone was by the sistren twisted him again. Desire not only of thy sovereign the thing whereof shame may ensue by any mean, nor wish not aught what may dishonor bring. So whilom did the learned Tuscan serve his chaste lady, and glory was their end. Such are the fruits that lovers do deserve, whose service doth to virtue and honour trend.
And thus ends Act 4. That's Act 4, primarily by Roderick Stafford. No, Roderick Stafford was Act 1. I'm looking at the wrong page. Robert Hatton. There we are. Robert Hatton wrote that. All of that cheerful stuff. I think he was quite into that kind of stuff. I think he was into the Blood and Thunder school of writing. Yeah, we've got it's interesting. There's very few textual differences. There aren't the significant changes that we had in the last sequence. This is retained by and large with just tweaks. Plus a big... there is an addition of sort of more dialogue-y stuff rather than just speechifying. There's a lot of speechifying in this version. We were talking last time that may be partly down to the nature of the performance space. They may not have a lot of room to move around in. They may have... it may be that the way they have to rehearse it and the kind of thing. There's no point trying to do complicated dialogue. They just don't have the time or the facilities. That is all speculation. That may not be the reason why. It may just be convention. They like long speeches. Maybe because that's just what they're trained to do. Thoughts in the room about this one? This poor chap. Not good things happening to Guishard. Lynsey, how are you feeling on his and Gismund's behalf, really, here?
Yes, I mean it just seems, although they both have speeches of a certain length, they do seem to be more emotionally contained and controlled and stoical, compared to sort of Tancred's, fuming and snake flailing that was going on sort of a bit earlier. There's a certain dignity in the face of tyranny that's interesting. I mean, it's sort of interesting what is also being said about love, because Guishard is in his little soliloquy at the end making a rather lovely simple prayer that he hopes that Gismunda won't be too upset when she hears about his death, and that sort of thing is rather lovely. And then the chorus's bit about, well, this is what you get when you when you put your love where you shouldn't have oughta. I just thought it was kind of interesting.
It's interesting, the sort of clues as to the performance of it, because in the later version, Guishard says of Tancred that he's doing a lot of sighing when he's talking to Guishard. Whereas Guishard says, neither do your trickling tears delight my wretched soul. So in this version, Tancred obviously is a crier. He's the kind of person that says, when you ask him, can you do some crying? He says, which eye? Maybe that was that kind of thing. Tancred is back in the room. It's interesting to say that this section is largely unchanged. It isn't quite as Blood and Thunder as that opening bit was, and obviously on that level didn't feel like it needed to be rewritten 25 odd years later. You know, that was much more in vogue earlier, but maybe felt a bit old hat later on, which feels a bit odd, really, because frankly, if any part of this feels like it was in the moment, it's the around about the time the Spanish tragedy is doing quite well. It's that bit when Tancred goes off on one. I think he missed his market a bit there, actually, myself. But hey, who to tell? Who can tell? Any other thoughts on this? Any love for the chorus? Lynsey, did you read the chorus? You've performed it before. I can't remember.
I think I might have done. But unfortunately, my memory does not serve at the moment.
In the other version, it's broken up into parts, so you might have just done a bit of it or something. That might have been
okay.
If you were there for that session. I cannot remember off the top of my head. I'm just trying to.
I think I might have been, and the broken up chorus does sort of ring a bell.
Because we had this lengthy discussion about how to make it work, and I don't think it does work. I don't think the chorus is designed to be broken up. I think it's an artificial thing that they did later to try and make it feel like there's more than one voice. I don't think it is. I think it's just one long ramble. I don't like the chorus in this.
Would it have been done in unison by a group of actors the way I was taught they did it in Greek drama, or?
I don't know. I don't know if we've got any evidence that they did it that way. I suspect not. I suspect that would have been just a nightmare. I have tried some of these neoclassical texts as chorus with two people speaking simultaneously. I'm not sure how successful that was. I have not as of yet released those recordings. They do exist somewhere. I certainly wouldn't attempt it on Zoom, because that would just be a nightmare.
No.
Other thoughts in the room about how's it landing for you? You can thumbs up, thumbs down. How are we feeling about Guishard? Do you think he's going to do well?
I'm not expecting a last-ditch revival for poor Guishard.
No, I think you're probably right. Right, we now go into Act 5. Act 5, somebody else gets to do a massive speech. Who would have thought it? Storytelling time. Some bad things happened off stage. Act 5, Scene 1, it's neoclassical drama. This is what happens. Bad stuff happens off stage between Act 4 and Act 5, and then someone has to tell everyone all about it. So the chorus remains on. Renuchio cometh out of the palace.
Oh, cruel fate! Oh, doleful destiny! Oh, heavy hap! Oh, woe cannot be told! Suffice it not, alas, that I should see his piteous death, and with these eyes behold so foul a deed, but with renewing care thus to distrain my heart, that I should be the woeful messenger that must declare, oh, me, alas, that sight which I did see, and that eke unto her, to whom when I my dreary message shall pronounce, I know to it needs must end her life, and unto me, that am already froated full of woe, how can it but afresh revive my pain to see this lady take it so to heart? In this distress low here do I remain, we note, ne wote, alas, the sorrows of whose smart first to lament, either thy wailful end, O worthy Earl, and of thy death the drear, or else the huge heaps of harms that bend, O woeful Queen, now toward thee so near.
What news be this?
Is this Salerne I see? What? Doth King Tancred govern here and guide? Is this the place where civil people be, or do the savage Scythians here abide?
What means this cruel folk, and eke this king that thus you name? Declare how you stand the case, and whatsoever doleful news you bring, recompt forthwith.
Where shall I turn my face, or whither shall I bend my wearied sight? Whatever way I seek or can devise, or do I what I can to ease my plight, the cruel fact is ever in mine eyes.
leave of this wise to hold us in such maze of doubtful dread, and what news you have to show. For dread of things unknown doth always cause man dread the worst, till he the better know. Tell therefore what is chanced, and where unto this bloody cup this in your hand you bring.
Since so is your request that I should do, although my mind so sorrowful a thing repine to tell, and though my voice eschew to say what I have seen, yet since your will so fixed stands to hear wherefore I rue, your great desire I shall herein fulfil. Fast by Salerne city, amid the plain, there stands a hill, whose bottom huge and round, thrown out in breadth a large space doth contain, and gathering up in height small from the ground, till less and less it mounts. Here sometimes was a goodly tower upreared, that flowered in fame while fate and fortune served. But time doth pass, and with her sway eke passeth all this same. For now the walls been evened with the plain, and all the rest so foully lieth defaced, as but the only shade doth there remain of that which there was built in time past. Yet doth that show what worthy work tofore hath there been wrought. One parcel of that tower even yet doth stand, whom time could not forlore, fortune down throw, nor length of years devour. A strong turret compact of stone and rock, huge without, but horrible within, to pass to which by force of handy stroke, a crooked strait is made, that enters in and leadeth you into this loathly place. Within the which carved into the ground, a deep dungeon there runs of narrow space, dreadful and dark, where never light is found. Into this ugly cave by cruel hest of King Tancred were diverse servants sent, to work the horror of his furious breast, erst nourished in his rage and now stern bent, to have the same performed. I, woeful wight, was chosen eke for one to do the thing, that to our charge so straitly was behight, in sort as was commanded by the king. Within which dreadful prison when we came, the noble Count Pelurine that there lay chained in gyved fast fettered in the same, out of the dark dungeon we did uprear, and haled him thence into a brighter place that gave us light to work our murder there. But when I once beheld his manly face, and saw his cheer, no more appalled with fear of present death, than he whom never dread did once a move, my heart abhorred than to give consent unto so foul a deed, that wretched death should reave so worthy a man. On false fortune I cried with loud complaint, that in such sort could deem this earl to die. But he, whom neither grief ne fear could taint, with smiling cheer himself oft willeth me to leave to plain his case, or sorrow make for him. For he was far more glad pay death to embrace thus for his lady's sake, than life, or all the joys of life, he said. For loss of life, he said, grieved him no more than loss of that which he esteemed least. His lady's grief, lest she should rue therefore, was all the cause of grief within his breast. He prayed therefore that they would make report to her of these last words that he would say. That though he never could in any sort her gentleness reacquite, nor never lay within his power to serve her as he would, yet had she aye his heart, yet hand and might to do her all the honour that he could. This was to him of all the joys that might rejoice his heart the chiefest joy of all, that to declare the faithful heart that he nor did bear to her, fortune so well did fall, that in her love he mote both live and die. After these words, he stayed and spake no more, but joyfully beholding us each one his words and cheer and marvelled us so, that still we stood, when forthwith thereupon, but why slack you, quod he, to do the thing for which you came? Make speed and stay no more, perform your master's will. Now tell the king, he hath his death for whose he longed to sow. And with those words himself, with his own hand, fastens the band about his neck. The rest wondering at his stout heart, astonished stand to see him offer himself to death so pressed. What stony breast or what hard heart of flint would not have molt to see this dreary sight, so worthy a man whom death nor fortune's dint could not disarm, murdered with such despite, and in such sort bereft amid the flowers of his fresh years, that ruthful was to seem. For violent is death when he devours young men or virgins while their youth is green. But unjust fortune, that so seld upheaves the worthy man, hath blindly turned her wheel. The whirl whereof both life and honour reaves from him on whom she did so lately smile. Lo, now the servants, seeing him take the bands, and on his neck himself to make them fast, without delay, put to their woeful hands, and sought to work their fierce intent with haste. They stretched the bands, and even when the breath began to fail his breast, they slacked again. So did their hands repine against his death, and oft times loosed, alas, unto his pain. But date of death that fixed is so fast, beyond his course there may no wight extend, for strangled is this noble earl at last, and reft of life, unworthy such an end.
Oh, cruel deed!
Why? Deem ye this to be the doleful news that I have now to show? Is here, think you, end of the cruelty that I have seen?
Could worse or crueler woe be wrought to him than to bereave his life?
What, think you that this outrage did end so well? The horror of the fact, the greatest grief, the cruelty, the terror is to tell.
Alack, what could be more? They threw per case the dead body to be devoured and ate of the cruel wild beasts.
Oh me, alas, would good it had been cast a doleful meat to beasts and birds. But lo, that dreadful thing, even the tiger would not work, but to fulfil his hunger with, that hath the king without and ruth commanded to be do, only to please his cruel heart withal. Oh, happy had been his chance, too happy, alas, if birds had eat his corpse, yea, heart and all, which here I bring, and not thus to the face of his dear love, I to present the same, with sight of work eke to procure her end.
What kind of cruelty is this you name? Declare forthwith, and tell whereto doth tend this farther plaint.
After his breath was gone, bereft thus from his breast by cruel force, straight they despoiled him, and not alone, contented with his death on the dead corpse, whom savage beasts do spare, gin they to show new cruelty, and with the sword they pierce his naked belly, and unrip it so that out the bowels gush. Who can rehearse the doleful sight wherein my heart even bled? The warm entrails were torn out of his breast, within their hands trembling, not fully dead. His veins smoked, his bowels all too stressed, ruthless were rent and thrown amid the place, and all clotted lay the blood in lumps of gore, sprent on his corpse and on his paled face. His heart, panting out from his breast, they tore, and cruelly upon a sword's point they fix the same. And in this woeful wise unto the king this heart they do present, a sight longed for to feed his ireful eyes. The king, perceiving each thing to be wrought as he had willed, rejoicing to behold, upon the bloody sword's point brought the pierced heart, calls for this cup of gold, into the which the woeful heart he cast, and reaching me the same. Now go, quod he, unto my daughter, and with speedy haste present her this, and say to her from me, thy father hath here in this cup thee sent, that thing to joy and comfort thee withal, which thou loved best, even as thou wert content, to comfort him with his chief joy of all.
Oh, hateful fact! Oh, passing cruelty! Oh, murder wrought with too much hard despite! Oh, heinous deed! With no posterity will ones believe.
Thus was this worthy wight strangled unto the death, yea, after death his heart and blood debowled from his breast. But what availeth plaint? It is but breath wasted all in vain. Why do I rest here in this place? Why go I not and do the woeful message to my charge commit? Now were it not that I am forced thereto by a king's will, here would I stay my fate. Nay, one whit farther go in this intent. But I must yield me to my prince's best and tell, alas, the doleful message sent. Yet doth this somewhat comfort mine unrest, that I determine her grief not to behold, but go as soon as is my message told.
And Act 5, Scene 2, we'll just briefly dip into Renuchio delivereth the cup to Gismond in her chamber.
Thy father, O Queen, here in this cup hath sent that thing to joy and comfort thee withal, well thou loved best, even as thou wert content, to comfort him with his chief joy of all.
And we'll pause there. I thought we'd just put Renuchio there to bed. You know, there's 4 lines you only have to learn once. But you get them out twice. So that's good. Yeah. So some nice cheerful stuff to pass on. That's quite a. That's one where I would be asking my employer, could I just have a little look at my job description again, please? Is this? I don't think this is what I was interviewed for. I don't think that came up, oddly enough. Yeah, lots and lots of grim, gory details. Very few differences between the two texts. I mean, this one's just slightly clearer, actually, a couple of times, you know. I mean, it's inferred that Guishard is cut open with a sword, but you know, this one states it, whereas in the other one, it's just, you know, they're just entrails everywhere. I don't think they actually state the implement used, so you know, it's a little neater in that sense. But yeah, they're pretty close. There's a couple of odd lines in the exchange with the chorus, but yeah, it's all pretty grim. Pretty grim. Did you enjoy that, Desna?
I won't say it was my favourite thing to read ever, but yeah. And it occurs to me as in one of the other first looks, I ended up recounting to the audience a torture scene as well. So maybe it's my thing. I don't know.
It wasn't deliberate.
I know. I was just like, oh, again. Yeah, it's I kind of like the device they use where the chorus is the person that the story gets explained to, so that's explained for the audience as well. But
yeah. I mean, it could be worse. We could have watched it happen. I mean, you know, that's the thing. Would you rather have watched Guishard be eviscerated, and his steaming entrails pulled out, and all of that stuff? I mean, there's part of me thinking dumb show while this story is going on. I'm thinking more shadow puppetry, you know. No, okay.
Bit too comedic.
Yeah, not quite the right tone. Quite the right tone. Yeah. Other thoughts from the room, Lynsey?
It just, I mean, a very small point. I was struck this time that there is this sort of formula whereby the Renuchio, the messenger in this case, will not tell people what is going on until they absolutely stamp their foot and say, "You must tell us what does it all mean? What happened? You must tell us." And it's just very interesting the kind of the way it works, that when Renuchio gets to the really grisly bits, they're actually quite directly spoken. So there's all of this sort of, I'm not going to tell you, how can I possibly describe what my eyes saw kind of thing. And then there is the description, very, very vivid, very lurid, and, comparatively succinct, I think. Interesting.
Yeah, because we have all this build-up with, here are the words of Count Palarin, and as he tells staff, and, those who don't, and these are the things, and then I just love the chorus just going, "What, there's more? It can get worse? Oh, yes, let me tell you how it can get worse." Yeah, it's delayed gratification. Tom?
I think it would also, his look, his smiling face, his handsome, manly demeanor, that would have worked beautiful. I mean, just as a long shot type of thing, you just saw this man, and then how difficult it was then for Renuchio to actually, as stated, do the deed and recount the deed to other people.
Yeah, I mean, there's also just a practical stage business question that I'm now thinking, which we've sort of haven't really addressed fully. But, presumably Renuchio is holding the cup throughout the entire speech. So, only got one hand to do any gestures with. That's you'd hope to be able to have some room to do some storytelling and to do some act or something. But, you've got this prop and you can't spill it. You've got to be really careful because, it's full of blood and a heart. So, yeah.
I think staging wise, Renuchio would have to put it down, and maybe it has its own key light or something, but because otherwise the audience is going to be really distracted with this cup, I think. But
he refers to the cup at one point in the speech, and I felt like it was actually in his hand when he was talking about it. So, yeah, you'd have to. I don't know how you'd work that out. Could you not? I mean, I know it's a health and safety thing. Could you not slosh it around a little bit and to add to the horror?
I think that might lead to a laugh.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. No. Back to not the tone we're going for. Okay. Fair enough.
This has to be said. This is one of those plays where there are no jokes. I mean, there isn't a joke. I've looked for one. I haven't found one yet. So this is one where you grab the audience by the depressing lapels and just shake them until they're done. Any other thoughts before we complete the unit of action? Because the cup's been delivered. So let's find out what Gismond thinks of this steaming, presumably, cup of happiness there.
Now, alas, come is that hour accursed that I, poor wight, so long have looked for. Now hath my father filled his eager thirst with guiltless blood which he desired so sore. This pierced heart, it is mine earl's, I know. My father's words do prove the same too well. This bloody cup his doleful death doth show. This message doth the same to plainly tell. Certes, unto so noble a heart could not a fitter hearse been allotted than of gold. Discreetly therefore hath my father wrought, that thus hath sent it me for to behold. In all my life to this my latter day, so passing dear, have I found to me my father's tender love, that I may deserve the same, but in especially so much in this, as I require ye these my last thanks to yield to him therefore, which is to me the greatest grief may be, that I cannot reacquite the same no more.
Renuchio departeth.
Ah, pleasant harbourer of my heart's thought, ah, sweet delight, joy, comfort of my life, ah, cursed be his cruelty that wrought thee this despite, and unto me such grief, to make me to behold thus with these eyes thy woeful heart, and force me here to see this doleful sight. Alas, did not suffice that with my hearts even continually I did behold the same? Thou hast fordone the course of Icindi, dispatched thy life from snares of fortune's venomed bait. Yea, thou hast run the mortal race, and left these worldly cares, and of thy foe, to honour thee withal, received a worthy grave to thy desert. Nothing doth want to thy just funeral, but even my tears to wash thy bloody heart, thus fouled and defaced, to the end eke thou might have love in the mind put so of my despiteful father, for to send thy heart to me, and thou shalt have this, lo, though I determined to shed no tear at all, but with dry eyes and constant face to die. Yea, though I thought to wet thy funeral only with blood, and with no weeping eye. This done forthwith my soul shall come to thee, whom in thy life thou did so dearly love. Ah, Lord, with what more sweeter company, or more content, or safer may I prove, to seek to pass to places all unknown, than thus with thee? For I am sure even here dost thou yet stay, and tarry me thine own. Thy soul abideth me to be thy fear, and lingereth in this place for me, I know. Why die I not therefore? Why do I stay? Why do I not this woeful life forego, and with these hands bereave this breath away?
She taketh a glass of poison out of her pocket.
This venomed water shall abridge my life. This for the same intent provided I of her which may both ease and end my woeful grief. Why then, and shall we thus unwroken die? Shall I not work some just revenge on him that thus hath slain my love? Shall not these hands fire his gates, and make the flames to climb unto his palace tops, with burning brands his court here to consume, and eke therewith himself and all, and on his cinders wreak my cruel wrath, and gnash thee with my teeth, and fall amid the flames myself, to break this woeful life in two? Thus shall not I revenge his death, ere I this body slay, and reave this breast the life? But let us die, for in such sort it likes us to essay to pass down to the paled ghosts of hell, and there enjoy my love, whom thus my sire would not permit in earth with me to dwell. He by my death shall have more woe than fire or flames within his palace gates could bring. This shall therefore suffice, that I will die. My death his blood shall wreak against the king. This heart and eke mine own, lo now will I with one tomb engrave, that so may rest my love, my life, my death within this breast.
At some point in the above, Claudia runneth into the palace to tell the king of Gismond. I'll just briefly pause there. So Claudia was a servant who we met earlier, who isn't in the later version at all. It's still the aunt figure who we met in the first half. But here it's a servant, and at some point runs away. This speech is so very different in the later version. There's a lot more stuff in the later version. You can tell Robert Wilmot sat around for 20 years going, oh yeah, I could add this, I could do more, I could do this. It's still... It's a very... Is it Sturkle? I don't know if that's just the way this feels very controlled. I don't know if that's just the way, Lynsey, you were performing it, or whether that's textual or not.
I think you could do it in a lot of different ways. I'm just, because I'm reading it fairly cold, I just thought I'll just read it fairly evenly. But you could obviously do it in many, many different ways.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the way this plays and how it all runs together, because you've got you're talking to this cup of bloody heartness, which you now fill with poison and then you drink from. I mean, this is pretty goth. It's pretty all out there.
Yeah, no, I think as I say, I was doing it very evenly just to kind of deliver the text in the clearest way that I could. But I think it's pretty out there, really. Do we think she's actually drunk the poison yet, or is she interrupted in the sip by what happens next, do we think?
I don't know. There isn't a stage direction here. I think in the later version there is a stage direction somewhere within this speech. So
I seem to remember, in the later version she drinks the poison, but then remains alive and talking for quite a long time after that. Yeah.
But whereas here we've just got at some point in the above, Claudia runneth into the palace. In the other one, you have been doing this while the chorus have been there, and the chorus go, "Are you all right? Maybe you shouldn't do this." And they run off, and so there's actually a conversation. There's an expansion in the later version, whereas this one is very economical in the way it works. People come on, they do the odd speech, and then they go off again. Tom,
I would just say, Lynsey, I thought it was beautifully read, in the sense that it was like the tide was going out, the inevitable tide, and the expanse of what is left, rather than she does, shall I do vengeance, shall I set the... But it's just that wonderful sort of, like, as you say, the audience must be just sitting there just going, oh wow, can we go home now, type of thing. Because
no, you can't.
Another 5 minutes yet.
But it had that wonderful sort of like desolation, which I felt was completely apt for the character.
Yeah, because I think that there is something about that, is that sense of, being trapped in a situation, and this is the route out, and that there's something quite methodical about it. That, I mean, you're right. The text might be going in a different direction, but it does work, and it's really interesting that way.
And it's very interesting that she goes, "No, I'm not going to wreak revenge, because actually the worst revenge I can do is my own death, because that will really kill him." So it's quite, maybe it is quite cold in a way. Don't know.
So, Greg, are you Tancred ready?
I'm Tancred ready.
Excellent. So let's
Tanked up for Tancred.
Okay, let's head into the closing moments and see where we go. Act 5, Scene 3. Claudia had run into the palace. Tancred cometh out of the palace.
Ay me, doth my dear daughter take it so? What? Will she slay herself and be thereby worker of her own death, causer of woe unto her friends, and mean to make me die?
Tancred entereth into Gismond's chamber.
Dear daughter, recomfort your distress, and suffer not these heaps of grief to assail your weary mind.
O king, seek not to cease my grief with plaint, whom plaint may not avail.
O my daughter, as thou received thy life from me, and wilt thou to requite the same yield to me my death? Yea, death and greater grief to see thee die for him that did defame thine honour thus, my kingdom and my crown.
Yea, rather herefore gavest thou life to me to have my death? So sayest thou, my renown, thy kingdom and thy crown defamed to be, when thou my love with cruel hands hath slain, and sent his heart for me for to behold? But in thy breast, if any spark remain of thy dear love, if ever yet I could so much of thee deserve, or at the least if with my last desire I may obtain this at thy hands, give me this one request, and let me not spend my last breath in vain. My life desire I not, would neither is in thee to give, nor in myself to save, although I would. Nor yet I ask not this as mercy for mine earl, in aught to crave, whom I too well do know how thou hast slain. No, no, father, thy hard and cruel wrong, with patience as I may, I will sustain in woeful life, which now shall not be long. But this one suit, father, if unto me thou grant, though I cannot the same reacquite, the immortal gods shall render it unto thee thy due reward, and largely guerdon it, that, since it please thee not thus secretly I might enjoy my love, his corpse and mine may natheless together graved be, and in one tomb our bodies both to shrine, with which this small request eke do I pray, that on the same graven in brass thou place this woeful epitaph, which I shall say, that all lovers may rue this mournful case. Lo, here within one tomb, where harbour twain, Gismunda queen and Count Palorine, she loved him, he for her love was slain, for whose revenge eke lies she here in shrine.
And Gismond dies.
Oh me, alas, now do the cruel pains of cursed death my dear daughter bereave. Alas, why bide I here? The sight constrains me, woeful man, this woeful place to leave.
Act 5, Scene 4, Tancred cometh out of Gismonda's chamber.
O dolorous hap, rueful and all of woe! Alas, I careful wretch, what resteth me? Shall I now live, that which these eyes did so behold, my daughter die? What? Shall I see her death before my face that was my life, and I to live that was her life's decay? Shall not this hand reach to this heart, the knife that may bereave both sight and life away, and in the shadows dark to seek her ghost or wander there with her? Shall not, alas, this speedy death be wrought, if I have lost my dearest joy of all? What? Shall I pass my later days in pain, and spend mine age in tears and plaint? Shall I now lead my life all solitariest off the birding cage, and feed my woeful years with wailful grief? No, no, she will not I my days prolong, to seek to live 1 hour since she is gone. this breast, so I cannot bend to such a wrong that she should die and I to live alone. No, thus will she shall have her request, and in most royal sort her funeral will I perform. Within one to be shall rest her earl, and she for epitaph with all graven thereon shall be. This will I do. And when these eyes of aged tears have shed the tomb myself, then will I creep into and with my blood obey their bodies dead. There will I pierce and reave this breast, the irksome life, and wreak my wrathful ire upon myself. She shall have her request, and I by death will purchase my desire.
If now perhaps you either look to see the unhappy lovers or the cruel sire, here to be buried as sits their degree, or as the dying lady did require, or as the rueful king in deep despair behight of late, who now himself have slain. Or if perchance you stand in doubtful fear, sith mad Megara is not returned again, lest wandering in the world she so bestow the snakes that crawl about her furious face, so as they may raise new ruths, new kinds of woe, both so and there, and such as you percase, would be full loath so great, so near to see. I am come forth to do you all to weet through grief wherein the lords of Salerne be. The burial pomp is not prepared yet. And for the fury you shall understand that neither doth the little greatest god find such rebelling here in Britain land against his royal power, as asketh rod of ruth from hell to wreak his name's decay, nor Pluto heareth English ghosts complain our dames' disdained lives. Therefore ye may be free from fear. Sufficeth to maintain the virtues what we honour in you all, so as our Britain ghosts, when life is past, may praise in heaven, not plain in Pluto's hall. Our dames but hold them virtuous and chaste, worthy to live where fury never came, where love can see and bears no deadly bow, whose lives' eternal trump of glorious fame with joyful sound to honest ears shall blow. Don't have nightmares. Yeah, in England, we don't have furies in England. We're all good Christian folk. We are. We don't have any of this stuff. So don't you go home and sleep sound in your beds. There's not any of this. It's not real. It's not real. It's a lot shorter as well. Tancred goes on and on and on in the later version. I mean, there's just so much Tancred. Actually, to be fair, I don't think that final speech is actually that much longer, but there's a lot more stuff. And he also gouges his eyes out in the later version as well, which he doesn't hear. In fact, we don't know necessarily whether he stabs himself directly on stage here and dies. There's no stage direction. He does say he dies.
I read it that he doesn't. It seemed like he almost lived on and then buried them, and then he just goes off to the grave at some point.
It does say who now himself hath slain, so I'm assuming there must be a closing moment there.
Yeah, but it doesn't feel like it's there to me. Because he has that lovely bit about crawling towards the tomb and whatever it says. But
yeah.
That makes it sound like he's chosen the longer life and put himself to the suffering. Which actually, I prefer that Tancred to the one in the latter version who goes and blinds himself and then stabs himself. The other thing I found really interesting about this version is that Julio, whatever his name is, isn't there with him this time.
Yeah, because in that version, the later version, he's got someone to talk to and say, you can arrange all the funeral stuff, can't you? You'll sort that out for me, thank you. I'm just going to blind myself, okay.
And also doesn't he suggest Julio kills him?
Yeah,
Helps to kill him at some point.
Yeah.
It's just interesting. I just found it very interesting, that lack of Julio. It actually made it more personal. It was more intimate, that last speech, than the second. Yeah, no. I still love this play, even in this version.
Yeah, they're different, not necessarily better or worse. They're just doing different jobs. Lynsey.
Yeah, a couple of things. Just looking back at Tancred's final speech, I hadn't clocked this before, but he says, I'll do what she asked me to, and then I'll cry a bit, and then I will, with my blood, creep into that tomb where the two of them are, and my blood all bane their bodies dead. So this is kind of like the version of him getting into the bed that he found them in and all that. It's like he's going to bury himself with them. They still can't get rid of him even in death. He's still gonna be there. Ew. And the
bleeding all over them, presumably as well. I mean, it's messy.
Bleeding all over them. But the other thing was, and I apologize because my history is rubbish, but in the 25 years or so in between this version and the version we did that's solely by Wilmot, as far as we know, I guess, has there been a change on the throne of England?
No. The Queen was relatively, had been on the throne for about 7 years when, depending on which date we go for, it's either 66 or 68, I think, are the two possible dates. So she was reasonably established when this first comes out. She's, well in by the time this is printed.
And the later version was the late 1590s or something, yeah. Yeah, okay, sorry.
1591, yeah.
Getting myself confused there. So yeah, I was just trying to think about, whether we can conjecture about any reasons why Wilmot took it upon himself to rewrite all of this.
Well, his introduction. Yeah. I mean, for those who haven't, do go back to the first look video. The opening session is of the session. The opening section of the first session is really fun because we read all the additional material that comes with the printing, and it's great because it's all this stuff about. He talks about this. This is a good thing to read on a weary winter night. Which bringeth with him drooping days and tedious nights. And then he includes a letter from his friend saying, "You've got to publish this, man. This is the suppressing of this tragedy, so worthy for the press, were no other thing than willfully to defraud yourself of an universal thank." And then he responds to this, and he does refer to various things. He's sort of a bit dismissive of the modern stage or writers, because he says, it's fine to say something a bit dodgy in day-to-day life, but, to put it in print, but a bad or base discourse published in print is intolerable. So, and there's all this stuff about lewdness, that people writing lewd things and scurrilous words is what you get from tragedian tyrants. So I think it's like he's looking back at his younger self going, that was a bit much. Which is weird because in a sense it's more extreme later on, but it's more perhaps poetic-y. And I think there's something about that. I think he has a thing about the not being too old-fashioned and something like that. I think there's a really good bit here that Gismunda's last 4 lines are really good. They're sort of curse lines, aren't they? Which I don't think is in the other version. But it's a lot more drawn out. There's a lot more twists and turns. There's a lot more business. There's a lot more dialogue-y stuff in the later version. I'm genuinely torn.
Yeah, is it in the later version where there's stage directions about her covering her face with her hair and that kind of thing? Yeah, okay.
So she sort of prepares herself in a much more ritualistic way, and there's all these things. Thoughts on those who aren't here for comparative textual studies? Just how is it as a play for you?
Yeah, as I say, it's very atmospheric. We had the thunder and the storm coming in, and then that wonderful torture and decapitation. And I suppose I'm only struggling because personally I heard news this week of somebody I know who had committed suicide. And so I have that sort of like that doleful, that slight depression, which is interesting for theatre to just to lay that on an audience and just go, right, there's the evening's entertainment.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you can tell it's written by basically students, can't you? I mean, that's the thing, is that this is the sort of slightly sociopathic-ness of youth. Just going, yeah, we'll do this, and nobody really thinking necessarily about any kind of level of consequences or whether this might if you've been affected by this or by the events within this. It's not really something that anyone necessarily is thinking of. They're just going, oh, let's have this, and we'll have blood, and we'll have gore, and we'll have this, and at the end, and it's not. It doesn't feel like it has a connection with the real in that sense. I mean, at no point have I necessarily felt like this feels like a true story that is speaking truthfully to me in that sense. It feels very surface. Other thoughts? Desna, do you have any final thoughts? I think I'll just go around the room for final thoughts on this this experience that you've had coming in halfway through a play where everyone's been driven mad by snakes, magical snakes that no one can see.
I'm a bit sorry I missed the magical snakes. Well, I didn't. I missed Tancred's speech, but at the beginning, I'm quite. Yeah, so I find Gismond's last section as well quite powerful, because not only has she wreaked revenge upon her father by killing herself, but then she asks him to do this thing of burying her with her lover, and so she kind of continues to get her own back on him, even though he has one like last final twist himself. So I kind of get what you mean about maybe being the students who are not really thinking through the realisticness of it. I quite admire the level of darkness, though, in a strange way. Yeah, I've been watching quite a lot of sort of Hammer horror and things at the moment, and it's that kind of stylized thing where it's and when we're talking about, he crawls into their tomb and blood everywhere, it's that sort of bright fluorescent red that doesn't look in any way real kind of colour. That's sort of in my mind. Lynsey, any final thoughts?
Obviously I missed the first session of this version of this material, and my memory of the other version is that it was quite, it's all heightened, but that there was, we talked about Gismunda's sort of, putting her hair on her face, and I think the word ritual was mentioned, and it seems that the later version seemed, in my memory, to be more ritualistic than this one. I think it is very, very, very interesting, I think. I don't have any kind of great glorious final thoughts about, and comparisons are odious, as we know. But I think it is it's powerful material, and even though we've spent many sessions on this sort of subject matter, this text, I think it's worth sort of delving a bit deeper into how these two versions, what the different things that they do with the different language and the different writers.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is that looking ahead of going right, because I really want to stage this. I actually quite want to make a film version. It's very rarely that I feel like I want to make a film. I'm not that interested in film in the same way, but I do see this as a heavily cut and very visually, not actually in a Hammer vein, by the way, but a very different vein. But do we go with one text and just do that text, or do we do both of them back to back, or do we do something where we really mine the variations and say what's our version, all of which are good options, and say to people in the real world, do you want to play around with a play? This is a play that gives you options for the kind of production you want to make, because this early version is really simple. With a few minor tweaks, you don't need many actors. There doesn't have to be much movement. You don't necessarily need any set. Whereas the second version, you need dogs, you need extras, you need a whole series of things that are a lot more complicated. Partly because they've got the no limits budget of publication. Some of which may have come from the original production, that just isn't in this manuscript. There was a big question about whether the dumb shows are actually from the original production, but they weren't in this manuscript because they wouldn't have been necessarily written down, and he's remembering what they did 20 years ago, and it's ended up. So there's all sorts of questions about what's the most authentic production as well, for those who are interested in doing reconstructive kind of theatre, which I'm not, but other people are, and there's a market sometimes for that kind of thing. What is the text?
Yeah, what is the text? And I think it would be interesting to look at taking ownership of what that is now, and saying we have this source material and stuff. And also, it just kind of flashed through my mind about doing a version in masks or something like that, to sort of does funny things. Anyway, just not really final thoughts, more random thoughts. But...
Random thoughts are cool. I like random thoughts. I mean, especially with our sort of budget and probability of the kind of shows we're going to be able to do in the near future. This early version is leaping out at me, going, this is the cheaper version. But that's with one minor tweak, which we'll still steal from the later script, which is to change the one random additional character and elide them with another character. Otherwise, I'd probably just leave it and maybe cut the choruses, because I'm not a fan of the choruses. I can't stand a chorus. You have to write a really good chorus for me to go, I want to keep this chorus. And we've already got a sort of chorus figure with the Megara and with Cupid turning up already. So the additional choruses, they're just arses, frankly. Sorry, I'm going off on one about choruses. Tom, do you have any additional final thoughts to throw into the mix?
Only it would be good on film, because I think to not supplement the words, but to enhance the words. This somehow I get a coldness of the whole thing is in that sort of like breath of winter, and sort of like cavernous places. So I think scenes in sort of like where you can just zoom in on the actor, but against this backdrop of this cold and barren type of landscape, because it is barren in the sense that nobody's happy and everybody suffers, and it feels like the depth of winter to me.
it's this sort of diseased house quality that I'm really liking. You know, that they've got it's infested with all these magical creatures, and that there's something unsettling about it all, and it's full of images, even though it's not full of action. And so there's a sort of, you can do stillness with the camera, a very slight movement, and just build that unnerving atmosphere of just something's not right here.
Yeah.
That could be really effective. I mean, inevitably, if it's on film, there will be far fewer words. It's just the nature of the beast. But to try and capture as many of those images that are in the words, and make that, you know, the problem there is going to how far do you go with the gore? Because you know, I wouldn't want actually to show much of that. I would rather it's all about just the horror of it all, and being told it is actually more horrific than I think seeing it. You know, it's that thing of when the cup comes on, how long do you linger on that cup? Because you could do that almost, you know, the way you frame that could be really interesting. Anyway, I'm rambling on. Greg, do you have any final thoughts that aren't mine?
They're two very different but very same plays. It's interesting. When I did the rough first pass at this for Rob, I was going, there's no blinding, and there's no this, and there's no that. But actually, yeah, I almost prefer this version of Tancred in some ways. But I mean, it's one of those great plays that picks you up at the start and just batters you to death and drops you off at the end and makes you want to go to the bar in the theatre for a very hard drink in a good way.
Yeah, I think I might be one of the few times, if I'm doing it as a theatrical show, where I'd actually not have an interval. I'm a fan of the interval myself. I don't like having long endurance things, but I think once you've got them by the collar, you can't let them go, because otherwise the show would die.
An interval would ruin this play. You need that input in that whole forward through it. Even where there's almost breaks like Cupid and Megara in the middle almost. They are, but they still keep the plot driving forward.
Oh yeah, they're just making it worse. I mean, when they turn up, they make everything worse every time.
And actually, Megara in this version, I think, changes more, even though she does exactly what she did before, if that makes sense. There's almost that sense of, yes, there's things with Tancred in the start, but I just feel like she's had more influence this time. And I think the set would have to suggest this house that is built on the most dodgy foundations of hell and has some rather interesting characters up above.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we've wrestled with these particular snakes for long enough. We will, I'm sure, return to this in many different forms. It's sort of grabbed us and in various ways. But all that remains is thank all these wonderful readers for all their wonderful reading. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.